World's richest man versus world's poorest country. In the world today, there's a great wealth gap between the richest people and the poorest. You've probably heard about how the richest people in the world today are richer than some countries. You've probably thought, surely that's not entirely true. How can a single person have more money than an entire country? Or, even if it is true, the gap isn't so big. Is it though? When you truly compare some of the richest people on the planet with some of the poorest countries, you'll be truly amazed at the gap between them. In this video, we'll take a look at Burundi, the poorest country in the world today, and compare it with the richest man in the world, Elon Musk. How big is the gap between Burundi and Elon Musk? What is the reason for this gap? What can be done to bridge the gap between these two extremes? Let's take a look at all of this in more detail. Elon Musk is a name that needs no introduction. Since his Tesla stock soared, he quickly became the richest man in the world, surpassing Jeff Bezos. At one point, he was worth more than $250 billion. Although his net worth has plummeted after Tesla's stock price took a dive and his recent purchase of Twitter, he's still worth close to $200 billion. Meanwhile, if you're asked about where Burundi is on the map, you'll probably point to the wrong location. You probably haven't even heard of it. It's a small, landlocked country in the Great Rift Valley, at the junction between the African Great Lakes region and East Africa. Being landlocked means it has no access to the sea. It borders Rwanda to the north, Tanzania to the east and southeast, and the Democratic Republic of Congo to the west. So, how big is the gap between Burundi and Elon Musk? Let's take a look at Burundi's economy first. Burundi's gross national income, or GNI for short, in 2021 is $2.88 billion. The GNI measures the total amount of money earned by a nation's people and its businesses. That's to say, the entire people of Burundi and their businesses earned a total of $2.88 billion in 2021. Now let's compare that to Elon Musk. According to Forbes, Elon's net worth in 2020 was $24.6 billion. It surged to $151 billion in 2021. So in 2021, he earned a total of $126.4 billion. Elon earned almost 44 times more money in 2021 compared to the entire country of Burundi. If you divide Burundi's $2.88 billion GNI with its 11.8 million population, you get $270. That's its GNI per capita. It means if every person in Burundi earned the same amount of money for 1 year, that amount would be $270. The average Burundian earned less than $270 per year. Meanwhile, if you divide Elon Musk's $126.4 billion earnings to get what he earns per second, you get around $4,000 per second. It means that each second, Elon earns almost the same amount as what 15 Burundians make in a year. That's a massive gap between one of the richest men in the world and an entire country. But why does this gap exist? Of course, Elon Musk makes an enormous amount of wealth from his business ventures, and he lives in one of the largest and richest nations on earth where opportunity is abundant. Meanwhile, the entire country of Burundi only takes up about 27,834 square kilometers, 24 times smaller than Texas. Its 11.8 million population, though, is only 2.5 times smaller than the Lone Star State. But is its small area the reason for its low income? Surely it's not. Other smaller countries have much higher incomes than Burundi. One example is Singapore. This city-state in Southeast Asia only takes up an area of around 728 square kilometers. However, it's able to produce GNI amounting to more than $350 billion. So, what's the reason for Burundi's poor economy? The answer has to do with its country's tumultuous history. Burundi was first colonized by Germany at the beginning of the 20th century and by the Belgians after the First World War. The country gained independence in 1962, but has experienced civil wars and genocide since then. The country is struggling a lot and will take time to settle down. The country's motto, Ubumwe Ibikora Itaramba, translates to Unity, Work, Progress. But ironically, unity and progress have been elusive since independence. Burundi has been plagued by civil wars for most of its 60 years as an independent country, Until 1996, the country lived to the rhythm of coups, massacres, and political assassinations, before plunging into a long civil war. Burundi is one of the oldest countries in Africa. It's also one of the few whose modern boundaries remain similar to those of the ancient kingdoms. The country is home to the Twa, Hutu, and Tutsi peoples. In 1993, an all-out civil war broke out between rival Hutu and Tutsi, lasting more than 10 years and killing some 200,000 Burundians. The country is still recovering from the damage caused during the war. More than 250,000 people have fled their homeland in terror. Since independence, Burundi has been governed by several military regimes. These regimes have used state resources for their own benefit, while ordinary citizens, mostly rural farmers, have suffered from the civil war. There's a huge gap between military elites and rural farmers, also known as people of the hills. This dissonance exists on more than just an ethnic or regional level. In fact, almost all resources that keep the party state afloat come from peasant work. And yet, most agrarian policy decisions are made without even speaking to those who will be directly affected by these choices, including local delegates, usually peasants, who simply follow orders rather than having any actual say in what happens. In the state, investments are directed and programmed by civil servants and party cadres. The average person has very little say in what happens. After the gradual return to peace nearly 20 years ago, Pierre Nkurunziza was elected president in 2005. As a member of the majority Hutu ethnic group, Nkurunziza ended 25 years of pro-Tutsi military regimes. The minority Tutsi made up 14% of the population and the Hutu 85% in the next 5 years. President Nkurunziza and his party, the National Council for Defense of Democracy, Forces for the Defense of Democracy, CNDD-FDD, went about consolidating their power. Hopes for stability were stronger at the next election in 2010. For the first time in the country's history, voters were called upon to vote at the normal end of the electoral cycle. CNDD-FDD secured another mandate thanks to a divided opposition and the charismatic personality of the incumbent president, who enjoyed massive support from rural populations. Nkurunziza, unchallenged, held all the power in his hands, which resulted in a one-party state. His party's youth militia kept watch for any sign of dissent among locals and squashed any organized opposition. However, once Nkurunziza went against the constitution by campaigning for a third term in 2015, everything changed. Despite the police presence, a large protest ensued and only grew in numbers. This led to fractures within the armed forces, which became evident when a military coup was unsuccessful weeks later. A violent suppression of expression and free media followed, with anyone who opposed being met with force. In July 2015, after UN-labeled neither free nor credible elections, the CNDD-FDD won by a landslide in the National Assembly. Ultimately, Nkurunziza's win proved to be detrimental for Burundi. His harsh treatment of opponents backfired as the country's economy worsened. Investors pulled their money out of the country, and infrastructure deteriorated. Furthermore, there was increased stealing from public resources and fewer social benefits available to citizens. The GDP in Burundi took a severe hit during the civil war, which fortunately ended in 2005. It climbed steadily for 10 years until 2014, when President Nkurunziza's political crisis caused it to decline sharply once again. In 2013 and 2014, Burundi was ranked as the second poorest country in the world. However, it fell to number 1 in 2015 and has unfortunately remained there ever since. This unfortunate turn is also confirmed by the UN Human Development Index, which looks at longevity, education, and inequality, where Burundi was ranked 180th in 2015, but bumped down further to 185th in 2019 and 2020. Burundi's performance is among the lowest on the planet for almost all socio-economic measures, largely due to conflict and corruption from elites. So, is there hope for the people of Burundi? The answer is yes. General Evariste Ndayishimiye, a wise and withdrawn man, became the new president in May 2020. Nkurunziza passed away not long after from complications regarding COVID-19, a disease he'd always underestimated. Having endured every type of division that can be exploited since independence, the people of the hills now understand that their struggles are due to elites fighting for control over national resources. The only way to make the state legitimate again and free up resources is for the population to take it back. This means that peasants need to liberate themselves from administrative and economic bureaucracies which have taken power and wealth by force, first for the benefit of a Tutsi elite and then of a Hutu elite. Burundians need to impose themselves through free, credible elections as organized citizens responsible for their own country's future. However, the gap between Elon Musk and Burundi's citizens is still unlikely to decrease soon. This kind of wealth inequality is unacceptable and will take a concerted effort from all parties involved to ensure that every citizen in Burundi has the same access to resources and opportunities regardless of economic class. We must strive for a world where all citizens are equal so that no one is left behind. So what do you think about this wealth inequality between a single person and a whole country? Do you think it's fair that a single person gets to enjoy all this wealth while the people of Burundi suffer from low income? Or is it just the consequences of a free market? Let us know in the comments section below. Click like and share if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe for more videos like this.